Welcome to the 8th of the Transformational Leaders Edge podcast series. My name is Gordon Simango, a graduate in the Doctor of Transformational Leadership program at Baki Graduate University with honors in the Organizational Transformation track. Our focus again today is on leading change, not managing it and not controlling it, but actually leading people through it. The truth is, most change initiatives don't fail because of strategy. They fail because of people, because of emotions and what's happening beneath the surface. And to help us unpack the weight and wisdom of this, again today my guest is Reverend Paulina Parhiala. Just in case you missed the last episode, Reverend Paulina Parhiala is the Executive Director of the Finnish Evangelical Lutheran Mission film. She has more than 20 years of experience in humanitarian relief, peace mediation, advocacy, development cooperation, and diaconia. Among others, Reverend Parhiala has served as Executive Director of the Finnish National Youth Council, Executive Director of Crisis Management Initiative, International Director and Interim Executive Director of Finnish Church Aid, Director, Chief Operating Officer of ACT Alliance, Regional Director of Fin Church Aid in the Middle East, representative of the Lutheran World Federation in Jerusalem, and Country Director for the Norwegian Church Aid in Tanzania. Reverend Parhiala has held several chair and board positions in the Finnish and European civil society, including the European Youth Forum, the Finnish Federation for Settlement Houses, and the Finnish Youth Academy. Similarly, she has held positions of trust within the ecumenical movement, including in the board of the Ecumenical Institute, BOSE, Executive Committee of the ACT Alliance Board of APRODEV, now ACT Alliance EU. Currently, she is the co-chair of the Ecumenical Diaconia Reference Group of the World Council of Churches. Reverend Parhiala holds a master's degree in theology, a master's in arts degree from the University of Helsinki, and an executive master's from the Graduate Institute of International Development Studies in Geneva, Switzerland. She's a pastor of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Finland and a teacher by training. Reverend Parhiala is a doctoral student of the University of Helsinki and is married with 2 children. And she's joining me from Helsinki in Finland. Reverend Paulina, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Gordon.
Thank you very much. And today we are descending on practice following our last episode, and we will be discussing case studies. And let's just dive into it and look at the first case study that we have to discuss today. And here it is. A financial services company, Reverend Paulina, has rolled out a new AI-powered platform. And leadership did everything right. So timelines, training sessions, key performance indicators. It was treated as a textbook implementation, but adoption was slow. And the initial reaction from the leadership was push harder, tighten accountability, repeat what worked before, the things that we have learned from previous change leadership processes. But under the surface, something else was happening. Customer service teams felt like their human connection with the clients was being replaced by AI. Analysts quietly questioned whether their expertise still mattered. So what looked like resistance was actually fear and identity shift. Then one leader paused and asked if this isn't a system issue, but a human transition issue. They began listening instead of pushing. Conversations shifted from performance metrics to emotional reality. And also, just to say that there was a pivotal moment when a senior leader actually asked a question like, and reflected like, we don't have all the answers, but maybe we need to figure out together. And he said this to everyone. And that single moment of vulnerability changed everything and changed the tone of the entire transformation. And here is the question, Reverend Paulina. What is the fundamental shift leaders must take from focusing on execution only to actually guiding people through the emotional arc of change?
Yeah, I think, Gordon, it's a very good question. I think people rarely fear technology itself, but I think technology change, as you describe in this case study, it changes relationships, access, processes, and even perhaps identities. And I think it is helpful to ask oneself in that kind of transition what people are afraid of losing, what expertise feels threatened, what new possibilities emerge. And is there a way to kind of preserve dignity and meaning, even though we would be moving to this direction, which you describe? Because I think what people fear is that they fear becoming irrelevant, they fear losing significance, and losing contribution. And I think we often say that leaders should be very close to the customer experience. And in this case, you have dual customers. You have, on the one hand, the customers of the company, and then you have the customers of the leaders who are their own teams, their staff. And I think the leaders need to kind of like shift their leadership action and look more kind of like proactively on that experience of the customers, their own staff, and of course the end users of the company products, and try to find ways to kind of preserve meaning and preserve dignity.
That's very, very important, Reverend, to look at the experience of your customers, but also to look at the experience of your workers as you are going through the change process, and also where possible maybe to actually get feedback from them, and so not to be blind to the process but to keep your eyes open, just to be alert, as you said in the previous episode. And let's just move on to the next of the case studies. We have this manufacturing company that has decided to restructure into cross-functional teams, and on paper it made perfect sense. More collaboration, more agility, so to speak. But in reality, performance again dropped, tensions increased, they became territorial, protecting their turf, and leadership did what most of us under pressure would do. So they went into autopilot, beginning to draw from past experiences. They reused old structures, doubled down on control, and tried to force clarity quickly. But one leader again stopped back and asked a different question. What are the people actually losing in this change? And the answers were powerful. Some were losing status, and some were losing certainty, and some were losing a sense of identity tied to their roles. So instead of pushing through resistance, they leaned into it, right? They slowed things down, they involved employees in shaping roles, created spaces for people to process the change, not just to comply with it. And one plant manager actually said something that really stuck with everyone when he said, "We are trying to move the system faster than the people can emotionally follow." And Reverend Paulina, I would love to hear your perspectives on this, and why, just to say that, why is it that that conscious response is so critical in leading change, especially in today's environment of constant changes?
First, I would like to say that what I have learned in the last 20 to 30 years of being in leadership and management is that change is needed when it's really needed. So it's better not to change if it's actually not going to improve much, because actually the transaction cost of change is so big that, often, going to organizations, I can see changes which have been started, but they have not been kind of implemented fully. But the leaders have become tired, maybe they have left, new leaders have come, nobody really remembers what the change was all about, and then new change processes have been initiated. And sometimes I feel like an archaeologist, seeing all those layers of unfinished change processes in organizations, which are just leaving people confused. And I think it would be helpful not to change things if it's actually not helpful, if it's not actually arguable why this change is needed. And I think in your case, I felt some weakness by the organization or by the leadership being able to argue, why this organizational change was actually needed. I think organizational charts, they can really change overnight, but people can't. And I think your case illustrates it well, that people need time to process things, to understand things. They need to have agency in those processes. So through participation, they can engage in that change and then eventually create new meaning. And once the new meaning has been created, the change is already quite far in implementation. So I think in your case, the organization was trying to move faster than people could actually intellectually and emotionally follow. And dialogue and participation, collective learning would have been really helpful in that process. And I think that if the change would have been done in less quick pace, but with some dialogue, with some participation and collective learning, it would have also strengthened the trust of people towards each other, towards the employer, and eventually, I think, if and when in the process of change, there are also things people need to give up. Once you have had that process of dialogue and participation, once the trust has been worked on, it might be slightly easier to give up certain things, even though it would be still painful. But at least you would have some space in which you could kind of deal with that pain.
Change should not just be for the sake of change. Change is needed, as you say, when it is real needed. And you cite the change processes that have been started in some organizations that were never implemented, and following that, some other changes came as a second layer and things like that. And I like it when you say that organizational charts can change over time. But the truth is that people can't just change like we have a new organizational chart today and we wake up tomorrow, it's new. But people don't just change like that. There is need, like you're saying, for dialogue, for participation, and also for collective learning, as you say. And just for our further deepening of our learning here, Reverend Paulina, there's also power in repetition. Feel free to repeat, but I would also want to say that this also, what you have said, naturally leads us to something that is often misunderstood. In both these two case studies that we have discussed so far, we see resistance showing up, but instead of treating it as a problem to fix, it became something else. It became a signal to something. Like you're saying, I think it was a message, it was valuable data that was coming through, you name it. So rather than asking, how do we overcome resistance, then the question became, what is this resistance trying to tell us? Like you're saying, maybe we need more space for dialogue, we need to create more spaces for participation and learning. So here's the question to you, Reverend Paulina. How do you personally reframe resistance, and how can leaders move from trying to eliminate resistance to actually using it as a bridge to build genuine commitment? I know that you already have made reference to some of these, but feel free to move in a different direction or to re-emphasize some of the points you already have made. Over to you, Reverend Paulina.
You should ask yourself what it is that you're actually trying to do. Are you trying to get your change through, or are you actually trying to help the organization to move from where it is now to where you think and others, often the leaders are working in collectives with boards, with staff leadership teams, etc. Are you trying to move the organization to where you think it would be actually genuinely more better for the organization to be? So if it's the latter, then of course you act with alertness and curiosity towards any signals which are coming from the organization or from its clients or from external context, which are sort of kind of like helping you to improve your plan for change. But if it's about it's my way or the highway, then of course you just want to demolish anyone who is kind of like bringing in a dissent voice to critique your perfect plan. But I would believe that any intelligent leader who has the best of the organization in mind would like to kind of engage with those informations, that data, those questions or concerns, and you would like to be inquisitive, you would want to know more, you would engage with curiosity, and you would probably even want to engage those people who are kind of voicing these concerns to be part and parcel of crafting the way forward, because they may bring something which you have not seen. I think also when you kind of like get to know yourself as a leader, you start to see that perhaps you have some blind spots, or maybe you have some shadows as a leader. And once you start to kind of recognize your most typical blind spots, I mean, you will see that those may be kind of like frequently those issues which are popping up as critical questions in the process of change. So I would say be inquisitive, be curious, engage that information, engage those people. It will be a better process and a better result for sure.
That is so powerful, Reverend Paulina. I like it when you say that one has to ask themselves, reflect and say, am I trying to push my own change, or are you trying to push your own change, or you're trying to accompany an organization in a process that is needed, or a process that the organization actually needs? Is it about you as a leader, or is it about the organization as an organization? And I think that is very, very powerful. Like you're saying, that if it's about the organization, like you say, if it's about the latter, then you'll be curious actually to understand each and every stakeholder in that organization and begin to understand their perspectives, be they customers, be they staff, or whoever, be the governance. And that is very, very important. And you say that if it's about you, then you are not afraid just to crash over everybody, because everything is just about you. So if it's not about you, you would need to engage everyone with curiosity and also the reflection, like you say, on your blind spots or your shadow. Those things, if you don't, will continue to haunt you as you will be leading the change process. And just as to come to our final case study, Reverend Paulina, here is the case study. A senior executive was leading through a major turn down, so tough decisions, layoffs, restructuring, a complete pivot. So they did what high performers do. They acted fast, they stayed decisive, kept emotions out of it, and on the surface, it looked like strong leadership, right? But inside the organization, morale dropped, trust eroded, people disengaged. And then came a turning point. After some honest feedback, I think the leader themselves, or the leader, him or herself, actually realized, I've been treating this like a problem to solve, not a human experience to lead. And when they reflected further, they noticed two forces at play, and one was ego and the other was actually fear. So the ego was, I need to have all the answers. And the fear was, if I show uncertainty as a leader, I will lose my credibility. So they did something different, I think, later. Then they slowed down. They acknowledged uncertainty. They opened spaces for real conversations in the organization. As you said, dialogue is important. And that shifted from doing the activities to being, and begin to rebuild trust in the organization. And so I am really curious to hear your thoughts here, Reverend Paulina. How does ego and fear again show up in the leader during change, and how do they silently shape outcomes? And the second question is, for high achievers who are wired for results, how does one begin that internal shift from constant doing to leading with awareness and with presence?
Well, maybe I could say with a little bit of humor that it could become as a surprise to many, but leaders are also human beings. So, I mean, they also want to be accepted and appreciated, and often also loved. And I think that it's very important. I mean, if you are working as a manager or leader, it's very important for you to kind of like work on your self-confidence and on your needs of being appreciated, and loved. And I think it will do you good if you kind of like work on those and become very conscious of your own behaviors, which are kind of often stemming out of those needs, profound human needs, which we have. I think traditionally, leaders or leadership strengths have been described, as you said, through decisiveness and having answers and certainty. But I think we should redefine them. You talk about this doing and being, with more issues like being able to listen, being present, admitting uncertainty, recognizing vulnerability also in themselves, having courage. I think that these could be kind of like redefined strengths of a leader. And I think what I have learned is that trust is not built when a leader is appearing kind of like strong and flawless, but I have found that trust is often built where leaders are kind of like recognized being competent, but at the same time human, like authentically human. That also leaders have their points on vulnerability. What has been really important for me in my leadership journey is that I have always wanted to meet the people who are leaving the organization I'm working for. So I have gone through many kinds of processes. Some people have left because they wanted to move on in their careers. Others have been made redundant because of downsizing. You know, there were so many reasons for people to leave. But I have always found it really important to kind of meet the people who are leaving, because in that moment they are very likely to be kind of quite honest about what they experienced, what they think works and what didn't work. And also those could be good moments for you to get also personal feedback on your leadership. I think it's also important to offer people that service of being able to kind of like leave whatever it is that they have in their heart, leave it with the organization when they are leaving, so that they can then move on more free and without those old luggages in their hands, so they can kind of like leave it to the past. But I think it has been also very important for me in kind of like learning about what has gone well. And sometimes it has been also very kind of like moving and even sometimes hurting if people have really engaged honestly. But that would be my recommendation, that I think it would be good to have that courage to actually talk with people also in the point of departure, because I think then you could learn a lot and have a lot to reflect on.
Leaders also do have human needs, right? The need to be appreciated as well. And I think one of the things that I am actually learning from you is one of the things that you say you have done yourself, or the important even to reflect, to talk, to meet with the owners of the organization or institution as you're leading these institutions. And these are moments where people can actually be honest with you, and this is where you can actually maybe get some honesty in terms of feedback from those people who actually important stakeholders to the organization. Really being able to get to the stakeholders and listening to them, but also talking to the owners, can also help you to get honest feedback as a leader. And just for the last part of it, Reverend Paulina, I want just to be selfish and just ask you an open question, just to learn from you any other nuggets that you might want to share from your experience as a leader, especially in leading change processes that might not have been part of these questions or part of the case studies that we have discussed. Anything that you really feel that you want to emphasize or to dish out to us. I would leave this moment to you, Reverend Paulina.
Thank you, Gordon. We would have a lot to talk about because I have learned a lot from you in leadership, as we have worked together in different contexts in the global level, but also in the context of the Middle East. Maybe I would just highlight two issues. I think it's really, we talked earlier about psychological safety and things like that, but I think it's also really important to lead in a way the dignity of the work. And we have currently a context where many values are being questioned. Some voices are very loud in saying this is not needed. The dignity of those groups are not helpful or needed. There are a lot of controversy and political polarization. And working in a value-based environment, myself, I find it very important to kind of like also lead the dignity of the work so that people could feel that, what we do is actually precious and it's valuable and it's worthwhile and it has meaning and it has impact, and it's supported by so many. And we are also very lucky to be able to engage with these kinds of issues. And I think if we kind of consciously message, communicate and lead the dignity of our work, it kind of like trickles down to all of us who are engaged. I mean, we start to kind of feel that, our work is important, our colleagues are important, and perhaps in the journey we are important as well. There is some kind of like sense of self worth, and I think that when there is that kind of, in a way, dignity aura, people also want to excel. They want to kind of invest into the work, and they want to do their best, and they want to support their colleagues to do the best. So in that way, particularly now when there is so much conflict around in our societies, I think it's so important to also make sure that people feel that in their workplace there is dignity and there is appreciation and it's worth their while in a way. And then secondly, I would say that I'm probably in some ways better leader now than I was maybe 20, 30 years ago, because I have accumulated experiences and I have been in several times in a hard place where I really did not know the journey forward. But I had so many good colleagues with whom I could talk and with whom we kind of would have discerned the way forward together. So I have been very lucky in that sense that I have always had that good collegial support and sounding boards around me. But, even though I have come through this journey, there are many moments on a weekly basis when I feel that I'm not sure what would be the best way forward. And for me, it's kind of like a sign that the leadership journey is never kind of over and done with. You are never really like fully learned. It doesn't matter how much you would read, study, or how many decades of practice would you have behind you. There are still many kilometers to go, and you can learn. And I think that leaves me kind of like with a lot of optimism that, it's actually very precious, and it's demanding, and it's fun, and you learn a lot about yourself and about others, but you're never really finished or done. So for myself, for example, there is still much to learn.
Yeah, the dignity of our work and and how we should have the quest to communicate and the thirst to communicate that out. And also, once we connect to the dignity of our work, that also really connects to us really seeing the dignity and the worth of our colleagues in the work environment, like you're saying, and that's that dignity aura, as you call it, and the importance for us to be appreciating others in our journey. I like it when you say that in your leadership journey, you always have maybe sounding boards, people that you talk to, people that surround you, people that accompany you in the process. And I think, like you say, that every situation is unique regardless of how experienced you might judge yourself to be. You always still would have kilometers to walk through in your leadership journey. So I really, really appreciate. And just to say again, thank you so much, Reverend Paulina, for navigating these complex issues with us on this podcast series, but very real life experiences that you have shared with us. I am deeply, deeply grateful. In fact, words fail me. And just thank you, and thank you again.
Thank you, Gordon. It was good talking with you, and good luck everyone who is challenging yourselves with learning and becoming better leaders.
And this is to our viewers. If you found value in today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share. Subscribing is the best way to ensure you never miss our next Transformational Leaders Insights. If you are interested in an organizational assessment or developing systems in relation to the issues we discuss here, feel free to write to findingexcellence@ehp@yahoo.com. I am Gordon Simango, and thank you for listening.